My name is Ava Whitmore, a trauma therapist who helps others heal. But one day, I discovered I was the one who needed healing. A hotel receipt, a familiar name, and suddenly everything I believed in began to unravel. From a devoted wife, I became the key witness in a financial scheme orchestrated by my own husband. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you've ever had to overcome the pain of betrayal. Trust me, you're going to want to hear what happened next. The envelope wasn't mine. I realized this the moment my fingers brushed against the embossed letterhead inside. The Langham, New York. My heart did that strange little skip it does when something's off. Like when you miss a step going downstairs in the dark. I was supposed to be grabbing my conference materials from my briefcase, preparing for my panel on trauma recovery at Columbia. Instead, I held Ethan's envelope, the one he'd hastily shoved into my bag that morning with a kiss on my forehead and his usual break-a-leg love. The receipt inside was dated 3 nights ago. 2 guests, premium suite, champagne service at 11 p.m. 3 nights ago, Ethan had been teaching his evening finance seminar at Harvard. Or so he'd told me over our FaceTime call. His office bookshelves visible behind him, that familiar portrait of Keynes watching over his shoulder. I sat in my hotel room, 38 years old, successful trauma therapist, trusted by Boston's elite to untangle their deepest wounds, and I couldn't make sense of a simple receipt. My hands weren't shaking. That would come later. Instead, I felt oddly detached, clinical, as if I were observing myself from across the room. Subject exhibits initial signs of cognitive dissonance. I might write in my notes. Unable to reconcile conflicting data points. The conference went well. I delivered my presentation on attachment trauma, answered questions about trust rebuilding, signed copies of my book. I smiled at the right moments, nodded thoughtfully, engaged with colleagues. All while that receipt burned in my jacket pocket like a lit match. On the train back to Boston, I made a list. Not of accusations or fears, but observations. Data points, as Ethan would say. Different cologne last month. Tom Ford, not his usual creed. New phone passcode. 3 client dinners in the past 2 weeks. The way he'd started taking calls in his study. Door closed. As a therapist, I knew the danger of confirmation bias. Look for evidence of an affair. And suddenly, every late night becomes suspicious. Every smile seems forced. But I also knew the danger of willful blindness. How many of my clients had sat across from me, describing years of ignored red flags. Back home, Ethan greeted me with fresh flowers, white roses, my favorite, and Lebanese takeout from that place in Cambridge we discovered on our anniversary. He asked about the conference, really listened to my answers, refilled my wine glass without being asked. The perfect husband. The receipt stayed in my pocket. That night, as he slept beside me, his breathing deep and untroubled, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. First, I would observe. Document. Understand. It's what I did for a living, after all. Watching for the tiny tells, the micro-expressions, the words chosen and discarded. I'd treated too many women who'd been called paranoid and crazy when their instincts proved right. I wouldn't be one of them. If my marriage was ending, I'd know exactly why, exactly how, with evidence no one could dispute. The thought should have devastated me. Instead, I felt something else entirely. The cold clarity of purpose. In my profession, we call it therapeutic distance. It would serve me well in the weeks to come. Tuesday mornings had always been ours. Coffee in bed, the globe spread between us. Ethan reading the financial section aloud while I skimmed the arts reviews. But this Tuesday, 3 weeks after New York, I watched him differently. The way his thumb absently stroked his phone screen. How he angled his laptop away when an email popped up. "More coffee?" I asked, already knowing he'd say no. He had a breakfast meeting with prospective donors. The 3rd this month. "You're an angel, but I should run." He kissed my forehead, Always the forehead lately, I noted. Don't wait up tonight. The Orion Fund Board wants to review quarterly projections. The Orion Fund, our joint venture, technically. My inheritance from grandmother had seeded it. Ethan's financial expertise managed it. We were partners in all things, he'd said at the launch party 2 years ago, raising his champagne glass to me across a room full of Boston's philanthropic elite. After he left, I called Jules. My best friend since residency, now an investigative journalist with a Pulitzer nomination and a bloodhound's instinct for lies. "Coffee?" I asked. "I need a favor." We met at our usual spot in Beacon Hill, a tiny cafe where the tables were too close together and the walls were covered in local art. Jules arrived looking polished as always, her press badge still clipped to her blazer. "Spill," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. 20 years of friendship had worn away the need for small talk. I slid her a photo on my phone. Ethan at a conference last month, his hand on a woman's elbow, both of them laughing. "Do you know her?" Jules studied it. "Isabel Crane, financial wizard, teaches at Harvard Business. Why?" "Ethan's been different." I hated how cliché it sounded. How many times had clients told me the same thing? "I need to know if I'm being paranoid." Jules leaned back, her journalist face replacing her friend face. "What kind of different?" I told her about the receipt, the changed patterns, the locked study door. She listened without interrupting, occasionally tapping notes into her phone. "I'll look into it," she said finally. Discreetly. "But Ava..." She reached across the table, covered my hand with hers. "Are you prepared for what I might find?" That night, I made Ethan's favorite dinner: roasted salmon, asparagus, the good wine from our anniversary trip to Napa. He was 40 minutes late, apologetic, distracted. During dinner, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, smiled, a private, soft smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months, then typed a quick response. "Important?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Just confirming tomorrow's faculty meeting." But his ears reddened slightly, a tell I'd noticed during our third date when he'd lied about knowing how to cook. Thursday afternoon, Jules called. "Your husband has a standing lunch date every Friday. Cafe Bella, table by the window. One companion." "Who?" "I think you know." I did. "Will you?" "I'll be there tomorrow, reading a book, drinking overpriced coffee. Very boring, very forgettable." That night, I lay beside Ethan and studied the ceiling. In therapy, we talk about the moment before the moment. That suspended breath before the truth crashes in. I was living in that space, that inhale before the scream. Part of me wanted to stay there forever. Friday came with November rain, the kind that turns Boston into a watercolor painting. Jules texted me photos from Cafe Bella as I sat in my office, supposedly reviewing patient notes. Ethan and Isabel at their window table. No touching, but their bodies angled toward each other like plants seeking sun. The intimacy of shared focus as they reviewed documents, her hand gesturing, him nodding, both of them existing in a bubble that excluded the entire world. I canceled my afternoon appointments. Ethan's basement office had always been off-limits. Client confidentiality, he'd explained early in our marriage. Financial records, sensitive information. You understand with your practice. I'd understood, respected it even. We were both professionals with ethical obligations. The lock was electronic, requiring a 6-digit code. I tried his birthday, mine, our anniversary. Nothing. Then, on instinct, I entered the date on the Langham receipt. The lock clicked open. The room was neater than his upstairs study. Obsessively organized. File cabinets labeled by year, a wall of financial texts, 2 monitors on a mahogany desk, and a safe built into the wall behind a framed Harvard diploma. I shouldn't have known the combination to that either. But Ethan, for all his financial brilliance, was predictable about passwords. His mother's birthday, the same one he used for our joint checking account. Inside the safe, folders, USB drives, and a leather portfolio I recognized. I'd signed papers in that portfolio, trusting Ethan when he said they were routine investment adjustments for the Orion Fund. Behind it, a silver picture frame turned face down. My hands trembled as I turned it over. Ethan and Isabel at a resort? Mountains in the background. Vermont, maybe. She wore a white sundress, his arm around her waist. Both of them glowing with that specific happiness of new love. Or not so new. The photo paper felt worn at the edges, handled often. But it was the folders that stopped my heart. Investment accounts I'd never seen, all in my name. Property holdings for 3 companies I'd apparently founded. Loan documents with my signature, except I'd never signed them. The forgeries were excellent, but I knew my own handwriting. The pressure I used on the downstroke of my A, the way I crossed my T's. Deeper in the stack, emails between Ethan and Isabel discussing the structure, moving her assets through the vehicle, minimizing exposure. Her assets, the vehicle, me. I photographed everything, hands steady now with purpose. Replaced each item exactly as I'd found it. Locked the door behind me. Then I drove to Jules's apartment and threw up in her bathroom. "How much?" she asked when I could speak again. "Millions. Maybe more. I don't understand all of it, but..." I showed her the photos. "He's been using me. Using my name, my reputation, my grandmother's money." Jules studied the documents with her investigative eye. "This is sophisticated. International transfers, shell companies, tax havens. Ava, this isn't just infidelity, this is criminal. I know." The word tasted like copper in my mouth. The question is, what do I do about it? We sat in her kitchen until midnight, mapping out options. Confront him? Report him? Divorce quietly and hope to minimize damage? Each path led somewhere dark. Finally, Jules asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Do you still love him?" I thought about the man who'd held my hair back through food poisoning, who'd cried at our wedding, who still brought me white roses. I don't know who he is anymore. Maybe I never did. Sawyer Lynn worked out of a Chinatown loft that smelled like solder and red bean buns. Jules had vouched for him. Brilliant, discreet, and ethically flexible when it matters. He looked younger than his reputation suggested, maybe late 20s, with sleeves of intricate tattoos and fingers that flew across 3 keyboards simultaneously. "Your husband's good," he said after 2 hours of digging. "But not that good." He swiveled a monitor toward us. "See this? Orion fund transfers, routed through Luxembourg, then Cyprus, then back to Boston. But here's the interesting part." His finger traced a complex web of transactions. "Every transfer has your digital signature, except you were giving a presentation in Chicago during this one, and in session with a patient during this one. So we can prove fraud?" Jules leaned forward, notebook ready. "Better, we can prove conspiracy." Sawyer pulled up another screen. Dr. Crane isn't just his girlfriend. She's been placing trades based on information from Orion's investments. Classic insider trading, but with a twist. She's using a network of her own clients' accounts to hide it. My phone buzzed. "Ethan, wondering about dinner." I texted back that I was with a patient in crisis. The lies came easily now, a skill I'd apparently been developing without realizing it. "What else?" I asked Sawyer. He showed me property transfers, dated last month. Our Beacon Hill townhouse, half of it now owned by a company registered in Delaware. Our vacation home on the Cape, the same. "He's moving assets out of your joint ownership, probably preparing for divorce." The word hung in the air like smoke. "He's planning to leave me." "Leave you and leave you holding the bag," Jules corrected. "When this unravels, and financial schemes always do, you'll be the name on every document." I thought about my practice, built over 15 years. My reputation. The trust my patients placed in me. All of it balanced on a cliff edge I hadn't even seen. "I want everything," I told Sawyer. "Every email, every transaction, every phone record you can legally access. I'll pay whatever it costs." He named a figure that would have shocked me 3 weeks ago. Now I just nodded and wrote the check. That night, I set the table with our wedding china, lit candles, wore the green dress Ethan had bought me in Paris. When he came home, late again, apologetic again. His eyes widened. What's the occasion? Can't a wife make dinner for her husband? I poured wine, smiled. Besides, my birthday's coming up. I thought we could start planning the party. He relaxed into his chair. Of course. What did you have in mind? Something special. Invite everyone. Your colleagues, mine, the Orion board. Isabel, too. I know you've been working closely with her on the fund. Did his hand pause, lifting the wine glass? Did his smile tighten, just slightly? Or was I imagining tells where none existed? That's thoughtful. Isabel would appreciate being included. I'm sure she would. I raised my glass. To partnerships. We clinked glasses. He drank deeply. I pretended to. Later, as he slept, I lay awake planning. In therapy, we talk about reclaiming agency after betrayal, taking back power. But my textbooks had never covered this. How to destroy someone you'd loved, carefully, methodically, with the precision of a surgeon. Or maybe they had. Maybe this was just another form of healing, cutting out the cancer before it spread. My birthday was 3 weeks away. The Harrington Gallery in Cambridge had perfect bones for a party. Exposed brick, soaring ceilings, intimate alcoves where conversations could happen without witnesses. I'd treated the owner's daughter 2 years ago, guided her through PTSD after a car accident. Anything you need, Patricia had said when I called. The space is yours. 3 weeks of planning crystallized into this moment. Me, standing at the entrance in a midnight blue gown, greeting guests like nothing had changed. Ethan beside me, playing the proud husband, his hand occasionally touching the small of my back in that proprietary way I'd once found comforting. Darling, you remember Dean Morrison? He said, guiding another Harvard colleague toward me. Behind the dean, I glimpsed Jules near the bar, press badge nowhere in sight, chatting with someone from the Globe's financial desk. Sawyer was here too, somewhere, though I'd never recognize him. I clean up well, he'd promised. At 8:30, Isabel arrived. Emerald dress, understated jewelry, the kind of elegance that whispered rather than shouted. She kissed my cheek like we were old friends. Ava, happy birthday. Thank you for including me. Of course. Ethan speaks so highly of your work with the fund. I squeezed her hand, felt her pulse quicken. We should talk more about your innovative investment strategies. Tonight, perhaps? Something flickered in her eyes. I'd enjoy that. The party flowed like good wine. Colleagues mixing with journalists, investors chatting with therapists. I'd seated everyone strategically, based on Sawyer's research. The Times reporter next to Orion's newest investor. The SEC compliance officer across from Ethan's department head. Invisible threads waiting to be pulled. At 9:40, I climbed the gallery's spiral staircase, champagne flute in hand. The conversations below softened to a murmur. Thank you all for coming. My voice carried well in the space. As many of you know, I've spent my career helping people find their truth, even when it's painful. Tonight, I want to share some truths of my own. Ethan's smile was still fixed, but his eyes had gone watchful. Isabel set down her glass. My husband likes to call me his partner in all things. And I've discovered he's right. I am a partner. In Orion Fund, of course. But also in 3 companies I've never heard of. In investment accounts I've never seen. In decisions I've never made. The murmur stopped entirely. I clicked the remote in my hand. Behind me, the gallery's projection screen came alive. This is fascinating footage from a coffee shop last month. The audio is particularly clear. Amazing what modern technology can capture. Shall we listen? Ethan's voice filled the room. She's never going to know. We've been careful. By the time the SEC starts looking, if they ever do, her name will be on everything. The grieving widow, betrayed by her criminal husband who fled the country. I clicked again. Financial documents cascaded across the screen. Transfer records. Forged signatures highlighted in red. But here's my favorite part. Another click. An email thread between Dr. Crane and my husband, planning what they call the exit strategy. Dated 6 weeks ago, before I found that first receipt. The room erupted. Phones appeared. Photos snapped. Voices rose. Isabel pushed toward the exit but found Jules blocking her path, recorder visible now. Ethan hadn't moved. He stared at me across the crowd like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. "Happy birthday to me," I said, and finished my champagne. The FBI arrived at dawn, which seemed unnecessarily dramatic, but made for excellent footage on the morning news. I watched from my kitchen window as they led Ethan out in handcuffs, his Harvard tie still perfectly knotted. He looked up once, found my face in the window. I didn't look away. My phone had been ringing since midnight. Lawyers, reporters, relatives I hadn't heard from in years. I let them all go to voicemail. The only call I answered was from Margaret Chen, my mentor from residency. "I'm pulling you from patient rotation for 2 weeks," she said without preamble. "Non-negotiable. Your patients need you whole, not whatever you are right now." "I'm fine. You're in shock. Take the time. Process. Then come back and help others do the same." She was right, of course. I was treating trauma while drowning in my own. Jules's article hit the Globe's website that afternoon. The Orion deception, love, lies, and financial ruin. She'd been kind to me, painting a portrait of a woman whose trust was weaponized against her. The comments section filled with support, outrage, and inevitably judgment. How could she not know? I would have seen it. She must have suspected. 3 days later, Brady and Associates took my case. Criminal defense for me, because despite being the victim, my name was on enough documents to require protection. Rebecca Brady was everything I needed. Brilliant, furious on my behalf, and expensive enough to make me feel protected. "They're offering him a deal," she told me a week later. "Reduced sentence if he testifies about the network. Apparently, you and Isabel weren't the only ones. He had a system. A system. Like I was the product on an assembly line." More women started calling. Sarah from Dallas, whose ex-husband had run the same playbook. Monica from Seattle, still untangling shell companies 3 years later. Dr. Patricia Reeves from Chicago, a psychiatrist like me, who'd lost her practice when her husband's scheme imploded. "We should meet," Patricia suggested during our 3rd phone call. "All of us, compare notes, maybe help each other." The idea grew from phone calls to video chats to a planned gathering. 15 women, all professionals, all betrayed by men who'd seen them as useful tools rather than partners. We called ourselves the Phoenix Group, because what else do you call women rising from ashes? Ethan's parents called once, his mother crying, asking how I could do this to their son. I hung up without responding. My own parents, thankfully, just asked what I needed. "Time," I told them. "And maybe a good bottle of wine." The Beacon Hill house felt haunted. Every room held a memory turned lie. The kitchen where we'd danced to Sinatra while cooking. The study where he'd planned my destruction. The bedroom where we'd whispered dreams that were, for him, just part of the performance. I started sleeping in the guest room. Then, after 2 weeks, I called a realtor. "I want something different," I told her. "Smaller, cleaner, mine." She showed me a condo in the seaport, all glass and steel and water views. No basement, no secret rooms, no history except what I'd create. I signed the papers with my own name, my real signature, my own money from the practice account Ethan hadn't touched, probably because it wasn't worth enough to steal. Moving day came with September sun. As the movers loaded boxes, Mrs. Patterson from next door stopped by. "I'm sorry about everything," she said. "But dear, you look..." "Free," I finished. "I look free." The Phoenix Group met quarterly, but we talked daily. 15 women became 30, then 50, then a movement none of us had planned. My Cambridge office couldn't hold the workshops anymore, so we rented conference spaces, then hotel ballrooms. Financial trauma and recovery drew therapists, lawyers, financial advisors. Women flew in from Denver, Portland, Miami. The intersection of emotional and financial abuse is under-discussed. I told a room of 200 professionals. Behind me, slides showed warning signs I'd missed, patterns I now recognized like old friends. We trust with our hearts and sign with our hands. Predators know this. A hand raised in the 3rd row. How do you trust again? The question I asked myself daily. Slowly, with verification, and with the understanding that trust isn't blind faith, it's an informed choice. After the workshop, a man approached, tall, graying at the temples, wearing jeans and a blazer that suggested academic without trying too hard. Dr. Whitmore, I'm Daniel Kent. I run data analysis for financial fraud at MIT. I was wondering if we could talk. My usual deflection rose automatically. I'm not taking new collaborations right now. But something in his expression stopped me. A recognition, maybe. The look of someone who'd been broken and rebuilt. You were a victim too, I said. Not a question. My ex-wife, 7 years ago, took my daughter's college fund, my retirement, my faith in pretty much everything. He smiled wryly. I've been following your work. The patterns you've identified. I think I can help quantify them. Create predictive models. Maybe save some people before they become us. Coffee turned into lunch, turned into weekly meetings at a small Italian place between MIT and my office. Daniel brought algorithms and data sets. I brought case studies and behavioral patterns. Together, we built something neither could have created alone. A screening tool that could flag financial manipulation in relationships with 87% accuracy. You realize what this means? He said one evening. Laptop open between us. Remnants of tiramisu pushed aside. Banks could use this. Lawyers, therapists. The Phoenix Foundation, I said. We incorporate, seek funding, make it available free to domestic violence organizations. He looked at me across the table, and I saw what my patients must see. Someone trying to decide whether to trust, whether to leap. Equal partners? He asked. With separate bank accounts, I added. We both laughed, but it wasn't really a joke. Ethan's sentencing came in November. 8 years federal, with possibility of parole in 5. Isabel got 3 years, mostly because she'd turned state's evidence. I didn't attend. Instead, I was in Washington, testifying before a Senate subcommittee about financial abuse legislation. Senator, 1 in 4 women will experience economic abuse by an intimate partner. I read from my prepared statement. Current laws treat this as a property crime. But when someone forges your signature, steals your identity, leverages your trust, they steal more than money. They steal your sense of self. The bill passed committee. Small victory, but victory nonetheless. Daniel was waiting when I got back to Boston, flowers in hand. Not roses, wildflowers, chaotic and beautiful and nothing like what Ethan would have chosen. How'd it go? 3 senators cried. 2 asked for my card for their daughters. So the usual Tuesday? I kissed him in the airport pickup lane, ignoring honking cars. It felt rebellious. Teenage. New. Want to get dinner? He asked. Somewhere terrible for us? Pizza and beer? You read my mind. October came with fire-colored leaves and a letter marked with a federal prison stamp. I recognized Ethan's handwriting, still perfect, still controlled even from behind bars. My dearest Ava, I've written this letter 100 times. Each version tries to explain what can't be explained. I loved you. That was real. Everything else was complicated. I know you hate me. You should. But I need you to know that in my twisted way, I thought I was building something for us. For our future. I see now how sick that sounds. I still love you. I'll always love the way you touched your earring when you were thinking, how you sang off key in the shower, how you believed everyone could be saved. Even me. Could we start over? I know it's impossible, but I had to ask. Forever yours, Ethan. I read it twice, then carried it to my new balcony overlooking Boston Harbor. Daniel was inside making breakfast. He'd stayed over more often lately, bringing his terrible cooking and excellent coffee and a warmth that didn't ask for anything but honesty. Everything okay? He appeared with 2 mugs, bedheaded and comfortable in a way Ethan never was. Letter from prison. I showed him. He read it, face neutral. What do you want to do? I want to write back, not to send, just to close the circle. So write. I got my laptop, sat at the kitchen island, and typed while Daniel made eggs that would definitely be overcooked. Ethan, I don't hate you. That would be easier. Instead, I'm grateful. You taught me the difference between being loved and being used. You showed me that trust should be earned, not given like party favors. You made me strong in ways therapy school never could. You ask about starting over. We already have. You in your cell, planning the next con. Me in my life, building something real. We've both become exactly who we were meant to be. I'm not yours. I never was. I was always mine. I just forgot for a while. Be well. Or don't. It's no longer my concern. Ava. I saved it to my laptop, then deleted it. The words had served their purpose just by being written. "Want to go for a walk?" Daniel asked. "The leaves are perfect right now." We walked along the Charles, past couples and dogs and students studying on benches. At the bridge where Ethan had proposed 8 years ago, I stopped. "This is where he asked me to marry him," I told Daniel. "Right here. Big ring, bent knee, the whole performance." "Want to go somewhere else?" "No." I pulled off my gloves, found the tan line where my wedding ring had lived. It was fading. Soon it would be gone entirely. I want to make new memories in old places. We stood there as scholars glided past, as the sun painted everything golden. Daniel took my hand, carefully, like it was something precious and breakable and worth the risk. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For seeing me. Not the victim, not the survivor, just me." He squeezed my hand. "That's all I've ever seen." We walked home slowly. Nowhere urgent to be. No secrets to keep. No lies to track. Behind us, the Charles River carried fallen leaves toward the harbor, toward the ocean, toward whatever comes next. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out you already had what you needed. You just had to remember where you put it.